Hello, and welcome back. Uh, as the title says, the big day. Obviously, it's not the Super Bowl, but it is. That's what everybody calls the Super Bowl. Should be starting kind of soon. This is actually kind of perfect. What we're going to be getting into today, because it's chapter 13 of Matthew, and Jesus is finally doing parables about the kingdom of heaven, and they're very good parables. They get pretty in depth. The reason you'll see why he uses parables for people to understand from like many different perspectives in a way, because the kingdom of heaven and the concept is pretty crazy. Because we're so used to this physical world, so to see things spiritually and for what they are, it's a little bit hard for some people. So I'm gonna try to make this a little bit snappy. We're only doing chapter 13, but it's a doozy. We got about 58 verses, and then I have another small section I'm gonna read. It's what should a leader look like, which is pretty good. It's very good actually, especially for me. It hit home pretty good. So we're gonna get into it. I hope everybody's having a good weekend, good safe weekend, because I know that we had like a big snowstorm and whatnot. So be safe out there. And yes, my hair's gone. I ended up cutting it myself. Not too bad, man. Try to do a little fade and stuff. Trickier than it looks, guys. So we're gonna get into it. I use the King James version. There's other Bibles out there that are written very, very similar, so you can pretty much follow along. You could also bring it up maybe on your phone, or just pay attention. Eventually I'm going to have something up on the screen for you guys, so you'll be able to follow along that way. It's just I'm very busy with stuff, so little things at a time. Alright, so we're going to get into it. This is the parable of the sower. This is a very popular parable, and many have heard it many times. It may be your first, so pay close attention. I'm going to read through it pretty quickly, and then I'm going to slow down and at like some of the important parts, okay? And we'll talk about it. So verse 1, we're just going to go straight through it. It says, "The same day went Jesus out of the house and sat by the seaside. Great multitudes came. He went inside the ship," and so they're on the seashore, right? He spake many things, and here's how he starts. Verse 3. "Behold, a sower went forth to sow." Okay? "And when he sowed, some seeds fell on the wayside. And the fowls came and devoured them up." All right? So they fell out in the open, like cement or whatever. Birds came, ate them. Some fell into stony places where they had not much earth. Okay? Imagine a bunch of rocks everywhere. So they snuck in a little bit, and forthwith they sprung up because they had no deepness of the earth. And when the sun was up, they were scorched. And because they had no roots, they withered away. All right? So some seeds fell on some rocky path, kind of grew, but couldn't survive. 7, verse 7, "And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprung up and choked them." Okay. "But others fell into good ground and brought forth fruit." And I thought this was pretty interesting. He says some 100-fold, some 60-fold, and some 30-fold. All right? So some finally fell where they should, but some could only produce really good fruit, like a big quantity of it. Some could do a little bit, and some could do less. But they all brought good fruit. "Who hath ears to hear, let them hear. And the disciples came and said unto him, Why speakest thou in parables?" Here's a little section in my Bible. It says, "Stories to remember." Okay? In a literate society, like much of Palestine in Jesus' day, passes down wisdom in the form of proverbs and stories. I'm sure that we can all relate to some kind of story or an event, whether it be made up or a real story that maybe your grandparents told you, your grandpa, grandma, maybe your mom, dad, something like that, and it sticks with you, right? And that's why Jesus does it. It's something that sticks in our heads that we remember. Everybody likes a story, and stories are easier to remember than concepts of logic outlines. Jesus spoke in terms that would hold the interests of a society of farmers and fishermen. This is also true because a lot of them could relate to a sower. Make sense? And about 30 of his masterful parables, stories with a point, have survived in the Gospels. Lori? Oh, you're welcome. Pleasure to have you. Okay, so verse 11, he answered, so he's talking to the disciples now, right? Because the disciples just asked him. So he's going to explain a little bit more in detail, and it gets really good. So pay close attention. He answered and said unto them, because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. All right? Because you got to remember, Jesus just started kind of preaching, and the kingdom of heaven was something completely new. Okay? They didn't exactly know much about it, or it may have never even been mentioned in the Old Testament. I can't even remember. But God was creating the kingdom of heaven, and this was his plan, was to send Jesus, because Jesus had to do what he did, which is get crucified on the cross for our sins. It was his way of like offering himself, so that way we could have technically an easier way to prove to get God's mercy and grace, so that way we could get redemption and repent and then go to heaven, instead of doing like the lambs, offerings, etc. So verse 12, this is chapter 13 of Matthew. For whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and he shall have more abundance. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away, even that he hath. Okay? Because he just got done saying about the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. So whoever so hath, Jesus, God, with him in his heart, it shall be given. Okay? So he's saying that's how you get it. But whoever so hath not, from him shall be taken away, even that he hath. Okay? So he's just reiterating that, like, this life on earth it's just a grain of sand, you guys. This is really just a test on why we're here. And you got to remember that every day, because we are born in the kingdom of wickedness. So Satan's all around us, temptations are all around us, and we got to remember that. All right? That's why things are tough. That's why temptations happen all the time. That's why, because the devil will attack you in many ways when you're trying to get away from him, when you're trying to change your habits, when you're trying to change your lifestyle. He's going to attack you in many different ways, and it's going to be hard on some of those days. But you got to remember that we're just born into this wicked world. And as it goes on more and more, we just, sin is getting more and more widely accepted as just normal. And so it becomes more popular, and it becomes more just available. It becomes like the normal, right? It's like it ain't considered evil or sin in the eyes of people who do not know. Okay? But that's why it's important that we read the Bible and understand it, because we have to be aware of it, because Satan is very, very sneaky, you guys. And you don't want to fall short just because you didn't know. That's why it's so important to do things like the Bible study, so that way we know exactly what he says, not just what we think it says. Make sense? Or what somebody else thinks it says or said about it or something. It's very important to do it, to really get into it yourself for sure. That's why I'm doing this. All right, so verse 13. Okay, did I read that one? Therefore I speak to them in parables, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not. Neither do they understand. Okay, from a sinner or somebody who's new, that doesn't know much about Jesus or God or the Bible, it's hard to relate to this. So you just gotta really grasp a little bit at a time, because it is very complicated to understand, but that's why he's doing parables. So that's why he's explaining it, and it gets a little bit deeper into it too. So all those seeds falling and how they kind of grew, didn't grow, got eaten, thorns choked them. He's going to explain that here soon. Okay, so he does a good job at explaining it. And it's like, if you're curious, which you should be, we'll get it in just a second. Verse 14, and in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which saith, by hearing ye shall hear and shall not understand, and seeing you shall see and shall not perceive. For this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. All right. So remember how I said, like, in the Old Testament, things were getting misinterpreted. They were living, his word was getting twisted. And that's, I came across something really good earlier this week on Facebook about God and, like, the word. And he always talks about the word a lot, referring to the Bible, but the word is what is, like, and it talks a lot about the creation of earth and the heavens and the stars. But the word is, like, because God is a spirit, but he's of all good. So the word is everything, like, that is, I don't know how to explain it, but it's powerful. He did a really good job of explaining it, and there's more to it. I think I might get more into it. But the word that God tried to give humans, right, got, like, misinterpreted and whatnot. So it's very important that God intervened and stepped in. Okay, so that's why he did what he did. He had to, or he could have just left us to doom, like, and then because more and more people, the more and more the word gets, because, like, okay, here's a good example. Remember how I just got done referring to, like, how sin is becoming, like, the normal? That's what happens. Okay, and it's not normal, and it's not okay. So God's not gonna, like, sit around and just let it be like that, right? Because he wanted this test. He wanted it to go on longer. Okay, he wanted more people. He wanted life on earth to go further. So he ended up having this plan where he brought Jesus and then created the New Testament, which is, like, half of the Bible, right? So, I mean, the first half is really a lot about, like, history, because there's, like, a lot of situations that happen and whatnot. But it's also about the creation. It's about the history of mankind during that time. And God was doing things different. He would send angels to talk to people who did have strong faith in God. And there's a lot of good stories, very good stories about it. But eventually, God was like, I'm going to send my son. We're going to do this a little bit different. And he's going to fix all this misinterpretation of the word getting twisted. Okay? And that's what Satan does. Satan will work in people to try to attack the word of what actually is. And it's not even just the Bible. It's, like, what's right and what's wrong, right? Because, like, there is no leeway when it comes to it. There's what's good and then there's what's evil. It's not like it's kind of good or it's kind of evil, because it's always where the root is, which is, like, technically the intention, the heart, right? Which is what he just got done talking about. I'm going to reread verse 15 now. He says, because Jesus is talking about over time, this is what's happened to people's ears, eyes, and heart. Okay? For this people's heart is waxed gross. Think of like harden, or like it's hardened, wax, okay? And their ears are dull of hearing, okay? Because he's saying that everything is not what it should be, okay? Their ears are not as open as they should be because they only hear physical sounds, right? They don't, and what they see is only physical things. They're not, because like whenever something is like emotional or strong, such as, it could be small stuff. It could be like, you see it all the time, like in videos and whatnot. People saving other people, like they risk their life to go save them, or animals saving other animals, or like children being born, people getting helped, like people being generous. Those things you can see, and you can see the generosity, you can see the love, you can see the care, you can see it. But if you don't know how to see it, you don't see it. Okay? If you don't know or understand good, evil, and the word, you will not be able to see what it truly is. Okay? Same thing with hearing. Okay? So the word I love you, okay? For example, if somebody, you can tell when somebody truly means it when they say it, when it's genuine. Okay? But you got to be able to understand and hear. Make sense? It's that concept. But the most important part is the heart. All right? Because that is just like, I'll finish reading it. And their eyes have closed, lest at any time should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart. Okay? It's so important to understand with your heart. Once you actually understand what he is trying to show us and what he's trying to explain to us about good and evil in the word, then and only then your heart can actually understand it. Once you understand it, then you're on the right path, okay? And should be converted, and I should heal them, okay? So once, because it has to be felt with the heart, and then that's how the Spirit will speak to you. And you got to obviously make your own choice, and that's perfectly okay. I respect everybody's choice, always and forever, because that's why God even put us here. But the most important thing is he put this in front of us, right? He put the Bible in front of us, so that way we can at least get as much knowledge of what actually is real, which is actually real. It's not, we're so busy with not trying to actually understand this, so what we see and hear in this physical world is what we think is real, which it is real. Is like physical world is real, okay? Emotions and all this stuff is real, but so is spirituality and this word, okay? So it's very important to at least read it once. If you're gonna, don't be lazy. If you can't, that's like me never taking a science class and saying science is not real, or me taking a math class. Like, that's like me taking first grade math and then never taking math again and just being like, math ain't real. And it's because I was so frustrated with, okay, I started to learn addition, and this is not true because I love math, but so it's like me learning, but I think a lot of people can relate to numbers and math. A lot of people hate math because some people like it, but not majority. So like addition, okay, you start to get the hang of addition, then subtraction comes. Subtraction, you just don't understand it. It's complicated. So then you just give up on it. Give up on it. Then there's so much more. There's division, multiplication, geometry, calculus. Okay, so there's so much math out there, right? But because you gave up on it, you didn't really understand it all. You're just going to be like, math is BS. Math is dumb. Math, I don't understand it. And that's, you have a negative, and you don't have an understanding about it at all. Okay? Same thing with like the word, the Bible. So it's very, very important to at least give it a chance. Verse 16, but blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. And he's talking to the disciples. So we should be very pleased once we do understand the word and Bible and God and the Holy Spirit. Okay? We should be blessed and pleased that we have the opportunity to get that far. Because a lot don't have that. We got to be patient with people. God is patient with us. it's very important to not try to, and this can go out to like a lot of preachers, and people who just have, if you're a Christian, you have people in your life where you know that they're not saved or like they're not living for God because you can see their fruit. But that doesn't mean you try to persecute them and like target them and go at them aggressively. You got to be patient with people. People, a lot of times, I posted this up on my Facebook not so long ago. It says, rock bottoms will teach you things that mountaintops will never do. Okay? So when you're at your best, in your life, and you've been striving for this job and you finally got the job, well, you're not going to learn much once you're at the top. Okay? But I'm saying like the things that are like strong, like morals, beliefs, things that actually matter, because that job doesn't actually matter. Yes, it might give you the, you spend all that time and money to get to that point, so you feel like you have to have it, plus, to like, make a living. But there are millions of other jobs that you could have done and still do, even if you lose that job. I mean, in COVID, look at the pipeline, for example. People had their job and all of a sudden it got taken away. It's not the end of their life. It's not that they can't provide. They just have to take a different route. Okay? And it's just, we dwell upon trying to strive for what we want in life. And once we get to the top or whatever, I promise you, if it ain't if it's not God's will, and if it's not, and you're just not going to eventually be happy. What happens a lot of times is people will say, and that's what depression, like depression consists of, as well as you strive for different things to try to make you happy. And things will make you happy temporarily, but that's not actually true happiness. That's just like, because happiness is something that you choose. Happiness can always and should always be with you. And that's why, like, once you get saved and God's with you, you have a peace and he blesses you, and you feel good about things, even when things might seem crazy and hectic. Like, somebody else's will see your like life or your like whatever, and they don't see it. They don't, because they don't feel it. Remember how like their heart, they have a waxed hard heart. They don't understand it. They don't see it. They don't feel it. It's because their ears can't hear, and they can't see right. Their heart is hard, so they haven't accepted it. So, and I've seen some super poor people, for example, because we all like to refer to wealth. Wealth is just finances and money and like situation of living. But I've seen some of the most happiest people living in third world countries, living in garbage, where I've seen, celebrities being, going bankrupt and being miserable, domestic violence, this and that. It's like, so money does not bring you happiness. Okay. That's just like a illusion. It's only temporary. It's because you are thinking it will bring you happiness. That's probably the biggest reason why you feel happy about it for temporarily, is because you think it's going to bring you happiness. But then after a while, you realize it doesn't. And then that's when it's like, because a lot of times people will jump ship. They'll strive for, when I go to college, I'll be happy. Oh, when I, finally get in a new relationship, I'll be happy. Oh, and then they get that, and then they're like, well, what, then the whole illusion goes away, and then they're not happy, and they're like, well, when I start a family, I'll be happy. Oh, when I finally get my job, I'll be happy. Okay? It's all an illusion. To try to chase happiness, but happiness is not in those things. They're chasing the wrong thing. All right, so verse 17, he says this to the disciples. For verily I say unto you, that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which you see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which ye hear, and have not heard them. Amen. This is exactly what I'm talking about. People who do not understand or try to give the word a chance, and understand what he stands for and what actually is, which is technically all good. Oh no. I don't know where it was. Something fell out of my Bible. I don't know where it was. We'll put it right there. So yeah. Pretty much just what I just got done clarifying there. Verse 18, hear ye therefore the parable of the sower. When anyone heareth the word of the kingdom and understandeth it not, then cometh the wicked one, Satan, and catcheth away that which was sown in his heart. This is he which received seed by the wayside. Okay. When anyone heareth the word of the kingdom and understandeth it not. So, Hazmat, what's up, bud? So, you know, now he's going to get into detail of the seeds, okay? So, I'll explain it in case you missed it. There was like 4 different paths that the seeds took, okay? The sower, okay? Let me just, like, the sower would be God, okay? The farmer. Seeds are humans and our souls, okay? It's our souls. And for example, some fall on the wayside, which is like, let's picture like a sidewalk, okay? The birds came and ate them up. The bird would be considered Satan, for example, the evil one, okay? So the seeds, now as the plants grow, that is us understanding God's word and striving for it and trying to learn, right? Well, they never really got a chance to grow, did they? Seeds can't grow on the sidewalk. And the devil already has them in his grasp. They try to start to, like, maybe, you know, go to a Bible study or go to church once, or, you know, maybe do some research on a video or like a article, or maybe they open up their own Bible if they have one or something. They start to kind of get into it, but then they don't get into it too much. They make a quick judgment. A lot of people don't have patience. This is something that, trust me, if this was like the test of life, if this is why we're here, do you think God would like let us understand it and feel it and 100% in like 1 day or 2 days or a week? No. I mean, truthfully, this Bible's going to take me forever to go through. I'm not a slow reader, but I mean, for somebody who does, like, okay, I was brought up in church, so I had many preachers, experiences, lessons, church camps, whatever. I've had a lot of things slowly give me information and understand and be able to see and hear. And then I was able to feel with my heart and actually grasp the goodness of what God is here in this earth, because it's all spirituality. It's not physical, and it's not just mental. Okay. It's not just emotions. Okay. And I promise you, once you actually understand what good and evil is in God and the spirituality side, you will actually start to see all that in the physical world, in the mental world, in the emotional world. All this stuff, you'll start to see it because it plays a big factor in this world, because it's actually, you know, what this world actually consists of, you know? Because a lot of times you hear about people doing evil things or bad things, and you're just like, how could somebody do that? Like, I don't get it. We want to try and make it logical sense in saying they were mentally unstable or they're lunatics or they're crazy. And that's not the case. They might have had a rough childhood, rough stuff where they have made bad decisions and their heart became evil and more dark, you know. So, and then they gave in to the temptation of harming others. Okay, that's all it is. And it's just as bad as if you were to, I mean, obviously if you're taking somebody out of this life, out of this world, we look at it as like extremely bad, but all sin is the same in the eyes of God. So for example, if you were to abuse somebody, like abusive, right? So if you were to abuse somebody physically and then somebody abuse somebody emotionally and, you know, with words instead of physical, they are still both bad, plain and simple. They're not good, they're both bad. And they are both harmful in their own way. Being emotional or emotionally abusive can ruin somebody's life and mindset for years and years and years. Physical, you might, you know, give somebody a black eye or something, but that black eye is going to heal a lot faster than those emotion words, technically. But we are so busy with seeing with just our eyes that we don't actually understand the true root of it and how bad and extreme that it all is. Okay? Because it's all bad. Plain and simple. We're so quick to try to judge and pick and choose, and instead of just realizing that good is good and bad is bad, and that is, in the end, that's literally what's it. So these seeds fell on the wayside, and then he says the evil one came, the wicked one, and catcheth away, which was sown in his heart. So these are people who give up on trying to learn about God very quickly. And I in a way, I would say they're weak-minded. Okay, if we all were spoiled, or we all like made decisions very, very fast, we wouldn't actually choose. We wouldn't know what we actually like. For example, food. Very simple. If I tried one thing when I was a kid, I tried one thing and it was disgusting. Now, I'm going to let that one moment affect my mind and judgment about the next food I try. So, because it looks similar, I'm not going to like that also in my head. But really, I might really love it. But I don't give it a chance and I don't try it because of the first experience or the first thing, or it looks similar, or, all religions the same, or like something. Maybe they started to learn one religion, and I do think that many religions are similar, and the concept is what's important, you guys. That's what's very important. We're too busy at pointing and trying to divide ourselves when a lot of us are actually Christian believers and following and trying to strive to be like Jesus, because Jesus was God in human form. Like, exactly what God would expect of us if we were perfect, but we're not, because sin and temptation is so strong that we all eventually sin. And usually we all sin because we don't even know about God, which is what he was talking about, which is kind of these people, okay? Weak-minded people. You give up before you even try, okay? That's what these seeds are here, okay? Now, he's about to get into the next seeds that fell on the stony places. He says, verse 20, but he that received the seed into stony places, the same is he that heareth the word, and anon with joy, and receiveth it. Okay, so these people started these seeds, hear the word, and begin to start to receive it. Okay, yet hath he not root in himself, but dureth for a while. For when tribulation and persecution arise because of the word, by and by he is offended. All right. So let me see if it keeps going. And he also that receives seed. Okay. Nope. All right. Let's touch on these seeds here. So these seeds fell in a stone, like a bunch of rocks, but they kind of got to the ground a little bit. Okay. And they started to try to grow. Now, when temptation, tribulation, persecution came, tribulation and persecution arise because of the word, okay? A lot of times we want to refer to the Bible as the word because it's actually physical words, but the word is what God is. That's what he stands for, and it's the word of good, okay? So what happens is when we get into the Bible or the Holy Spirit, because remember, these are people who with joy receiveth it. They're starting to get, they're starting to understand, because our faith is not always 100%, you guys. Our faith is never 100%. But that's why it's important for us to always be trying to strengthen and making sure our faith is strong, because there's always going to be that point if it drops too low and that temptation comes. Or in this situation, tribulation and persecution, and that is from the word. So what happens is, and it says we get offended, okay? It's because we know, so the Holy Spirit will condemn us. It will tell us when we are doing wrong, Okay, you won't feel at peace. That's how you'll know. It's like when you go to do something and you're like, you'll have that thought in your head. You'll have that thought in your head being like, this might be wrong, or maybe I shouldn't be doing this. You might only hear it for a quick second, or that thought might only pop in for 2 seconds. But if it pops in your head, then you're not at peace with it. If you're not at peace with it, you need to take a step back, because that is the Holy Spirit telling you that it's not right. But there's all this other stuff that's going on in your head and your body and emotions, because like, if it is wrong, it might be bringing you pleasure. But it's not like it's sin. All sin, the 7 deadly sins will all bring you pleasure. Okay, emotionally, physically, sometimes, like hormones. Okay, dopamines. Okay, whenever dopamines are getting released, you're having fun. Whenever you're having fun, dopamines are going crazy in your brain and your body. Okay, scientifically, which is real. So we want to justify saying, oh, it's not that bad. Remember how I said people like the abuse, we look at physical worse than emotional, but they're both bad. Okay, so we try to be the judge, and we're not the judge. Okay, God is the judge, and He gives us our word on what's right and what's wrong, and that's it. There's no in between. He doesn't make a list of, the top 10 things that are like okay, and then the ones that are somewhat okay, and then no, it's not like that. It's just black and white. There's no gray area when it comes to this. And we just got done reading how like John the Baptist, Jesus even told John the Baptist, like, the current person in heaven, the lowest person is like still above him. Like, that's how like hard the test is of what He wants from us. Like, we have to be willing to actually give everything to Him of this world and of our life, and follow His will, right? To do what He wants us to do. And He knows our potential, and He knows what we're supposed to do, and all this and that. And it's not like sometimes it's not a whole different course, you guys. If you're still, like, if you learn how to heal people, like medically, like, He might use that to help do good elsewhere, instead of just, staying in a local hospital or something, because that's what you want to do, because you feel comfortable, you want to be close to family, this and that. But if God needs you over here using your profession, then you must go. And if you disobey Him, then you're not wanting to follow His will. And it's very, very important, because that's something I have suffered from for a very long time, and I didn't give in, and I kept resisting. And that me holding back was disappointing Him, and it was making me lose my connection with Him. And remember how I said your faith has to always be, you want to try to keep your faith close to 100% as much as possible. Some days you have strong faith, some days it's less. But that's why it's important to keep praying. It's very important to always get into the Word, the Bible. Listen to sermons, maybe your favorite preacher, all kinds of stuff. There's like informative videos out there. There's all kinds of stuff out there. So these people had started to receive the word and understand it a little bit, but so they're learning about God, they're starting to follow the pathway, but when they come across something that they enjoy, when God says that you're not supposed to do it, they're like, like, why not? Why? Like, but I've done so much towards this, or it's not that bad, or you try to justify it. You can't justify what is. If you try to justify it and you try to rewrite what He is telling us, then you are no longer following Him. And that's when your roots, okay? He's saying, because your roots is what the understanding of God. The more you understand, the more you read, the more you get into God and live. You have to get rid of like sinful things in your life. so they can't interfere with your roots getting deeper. As your roots get deeper, you get stronger. That's what's going to help your faith, because you're limiting temptations. Okay, this is just basic understanding of like psychology. Because like, if you don't want to drink alcohol, for example, and I'm not saying it's a sin, but like we'll get into that eventually, I'm sure. But or like drugs, we'll say drugs because we all know drugs are bad, right? Because they're considered illegal. So like, if you don't want to do drugs, then you shouldn't be hanging out with people who are doing drugs around you, or being at a drug house or something like that, right? Like a trap house or anything like that. That would make sense, right? So you have to get rid of daily habits. Okay, it's like if you want to work out. If you want to work out and get healthy, well, you got to get rid of the potato chips, the junk food. Makes sense, right? I'm sure we can all relate to that one. All right. So verse 22, he that also received seed among thorns is he that heareth the word, and the care of this world, and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and he become unfruitful. The riches of this world, okay? Money would be like, it's not just money. A lot of people think rich is just like literally straight up money. But the riches of the deceitful of riches, okay, plural. So this could be wealth, which is, money and financial stability. So that would be considered wealth. So that could be considered riches. It could be considered, for example, like, I don't want to get into that, but like it could be things. It could be materialistic things. A lot of times it is. It could be fame. Like if you're trying to be famous, okay, that would be riches of this world. Okay, you're trying to strive for what really doesn't matter, like famous, money, friends, acceptance from others. I mean, the list goes on. A lot of things are like materialistic, cars, houses, but I mean, people, technically it all resorts to money, and that's probably why they say money is the root of all evil, because it does intertwine with a lot of things, but it's because we idolize materialistic stuff. We all like things. Some people like have an addiction for shoes. Some people have an addiction for fashion. Some people have addiction for cars. But, in reality, a car goes from point A to point B. A house is, 4 walls and a roof. So that way, like, bad storms come, you're protected, and you see what I'm saying? You can stay warm, stuff like that. That's all it really is. But we tend to make things what they're not. Because we are addicted to them, we indulge in them, and then we make them more and more unique and different. And then to somebody who doesn't actually understand it for what it really is, and especially like the newer generation, because they didn't live in a, like, because things are more magnificent, more crazy. So now we start to look at like, younger generation be idolizing about like mansions and having their own, like, their own, I don't know, just the list can go on and on. Things that are just extreme, right? You hear it all the time. People having their own tennis court and this and that. Like, okay, are you a tennis player? Do you practice on it all the time? Probably not. So if you only go play on the tennis court once a year, twice a year, is it really worth having? No, not really. You could just went to the park and did the same thing. Okay. So we get so carried away with having all these riches, as the Bible says, and the deceitfulness of riches. It's deceitful, okay? So we just become, we get tricked by it, okay? And these are the thorns in the world. So we're trying, and we're growing, okay? These are the seeds that were with the thorns. So they were growing, and they didn't have rocks and stuff in the way. So they're starting to like get root paths. Like they're starting to grow correctly, but they didn't produce good fruit, okay? These would be like probably people who think that they're living right, but they're just falling short. Okay, remember how I said I suffered from not proceeding on God's will. Okay, I wasn't producing any good fruits. Okay, I was trying to live for him, and I was understanding his laws and his rules and like what is good, what is not, but I still suffered from the deceitfulness of riches. And those thorns were choking me, and I wasn't getting myself. The beauty of it is once we're not actually fully planted somewhere, you guys. We can move our plant. We can move our seed. Okay? In the beginning, well, I was brought up young in church, so my seed was never on the pathway. Okay? It was never on the sidewalk. I'm blessed to have, a good family, and they knew better, so they at least gave me a good start. Okay? My seed was probably in the rocks at first, and I was forced into church. I did get saved at a young age, but then I fell off like really fast. But when we're younger, we are looking up to our grandparents and our people that we see, people that are involved in our life. So we try to be like them, but it's all about, are we doing it for ourselves in our heart? You know what I'm saying? So when we start to get into like the sinful world, and that's probably a big reason why, like, when people like preachers' sons and stuff, you hear about it all the time, that, they become like drug dealers, or they start doing some like crazy stuff. And remember, truthfully, all sin is bad. So I'm not judging them. I'm not saying like it's horrible. Like it's bad. Like all of it is horrible. Like no matter what they do. But somebody who's judgmental and doesn't fully understand it, they might be like, oh, that's horrible, right? Like, how could he do such a thing? That like, how, like, you can't grasp the idea. And all it is their roots were not getting sunk the way they should be. Okay? We think that their roots should just naturally start, their faith and their roots should just be strong because they're from a religious background or their parents, but that's not the case. It's all about the individual. God is a personal God, so it's all about you and like your feelings and like what you want to do. Because true intentions, do you open up the Bible for yourself? Not because you're just at church and then, hey, go to the, like if you go to church because it's Easter Sunday, right? Easter Sunday, you just happen to go to church because your whole family's going to church on Easter Sunday. Well, okay, and then you like open up the Bible, and because everybody else has opened up the Bible, that you're just following along. But are you intrigued? Are you trying to learn? Are you trying to understand more? Like that's only you can answer that. But that's why actions speak louder than words. That's why it's very important to do things on your own. And that's okay. So those are when your roots don't really get deep. And then once they do kind of start to get deep, like, because I have been in that situation. And then I have been in a situation where I just was over in the better area, but there was thorns and I wasn't able to produce fruit. And when you're in any of these situations, you don't actually grasp and feel God's power and his glory, his mercy, his everything that he stands for. Like, you may have had like little glimpses here and there, like depends on, but your roots, like because like when it's in the rocky path, it says that he not root in himself, but dureth for a while. It had to grow a little bit, like you start to, but the roots aren't deep enough. So like, and they have to remain deep. And honestly, you got to keep going, because this world, when I say temptation's everywhere, and it's getting more widely accepted, like your roots nowadays have to be super deep. So it's so important to not just, it has to be a daily habit, just like working out. Like, yeah, like you're allowed to take a day off, you guys, but you got to keep going if you want to have progress. And it only takes one slip up or two slip ups, depending on what your sin is and how addicted you are to it, to really make you backslide. Okay? One decision can make you backslide a lot, not just a little. So it's very, very important to like maintain that. Okay? Because, okay, so These were growing, and there was thorns. They have roots. They understand more, but they couldn't let go of the world. Okay? Remember, God says we are in this world, but not of this world. Okay? The test is here on earth, so we're here. We have to be here. We have to be here for the test. We have to be able to survive the wicked world to show God that we're serious. Does that make sense? So when you see all this sinful world around us and all this craziness, you just gotta understand that this is how it has to be. It's the same thing as like why Jesus had to come and die on the cross, you guys. That's way worse than us having to live here on earth with all the wicked sin and, you know, people judging us and this and that. That ain't half bad technically. Because what Jesus did is he lived for God and his will to the extreme measure. But he also suffered the extreme price. Okay? Not just death, but like crucifixion, which is like the worst way to die. Being put up naked in front of everybody on a cross to like have to like slowly die and people just spitting on you, people like abusing you physically, emotionally, like words, everything. It's horrible. It would be the worst way to die. Because they're trying to humiliate. I can't say that word. Humiliate you. That's what they're trying to do. Like, that's the whole point of it. And for him to be technically the Messiah and God's actual son, it's like the most disrespectful thing that they could have done. And God says, Jesus told his disciples, I think we heard about that a little bit earlier. We read about it, but we definitely will again, that people will hate because of him. So, like, those kind of actions, they happen around the world as is. In different countries, people, you know, attack and even murder Christians and whatnot. You hear about it all the time in different countries. Like, the world is a lot more wicked than we think. Depending on where you live, you be thankful that there's at least some there's some structure and law that helps protect against that stuff. Because it could be a lot worse. Because it's the wickedness, the evil in this world does want to attack the good in this world. Just that plain and simple. It's the devil inside them corrupted their heart and their mind and their thinking. So when just like earlier when it says that we get offended by his word because we don't want to give up, you know, we don't want to give up all the bad stuff, the little bad stuff that we feel are little. They have what a lot of people would say like extreme bad, and they thrive in it because they don't have no good. They don't have no knowledge of good. They never felt it. They were never taught it. Like they would be probably ones who either had seed on the sidewalk and then Satan came and just devoured them up right away. So they don't have no roots. They didn't try to live for God. They didn't understand a little bit of what the word is. And the word is exactly what exists. It's like good and evil, and then it just intertwines with our life here on earth, physical and all that stuff. All right, so verse 23. But he that received seed into the good ground is he that heareth the word and understandeth it, which also beareth fruits. And then he says, and bringeth forth some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. Now, our fruit is what we do. Our fruit is what we do for God, okay? His will. Like I said earlier, somebody who might be into like the medical field, he wants, instead of you just working in the hospital over here, just delivering babies, which a lot of doctors could do, he might want you to go over here where they struggle with birth, and he wants you to be their doctor, okay? For example, you've already learned it. He's already molded you. He's allowed you to take that pathway. He sees your potential, and he asks you to go here instead. It's out of your comfort zone, but we have to be willing to get out of our comfort zone. We can't just live here on earth in our comfort zone of how we want to live. Okay? Because I promise you, most of the time, that's not your full potential, and that's not what God wants. Okay? So you have to be really, really open and understand that when you get your calling on what you're supposed to do, you have to do it. You have to do it, or you might as well just, I mean, if you don't do it, it's just as bad as if you were to sin, because you're not producing fruit. Okay? Jesus just got done telling us 4 different pathways of seeds. Only one of them is going to be able to pass the tests, produce the fruit, and he will be pleased. Okay? He's the harvest. We're going to get to that. He's going to actually read this. And honestly, we're going to get a lot faster here. I just really wanted to explain these parables because it's very, very important. So, we have to produce fruit because God is going to harvest. Okay? And he will judge us based on our fruits. Okay? That's why also in the kingdom of heaven, he will also give us, technically we get crowns for our, like, things that we do for him, which is irrelevant. It doesn't even matter. But it's just his way of saying thanks. Appreciation. So, and it's not saying that people can get saved at the last minute if they truly mean it, and yes, their life can get taken away. It's unfortunate they weren't able to produce much fruit, but if had they lived a little bit longer, then they could have. But it's just the way it happened. But the main thing is, hopefully they didn't just do it because they thought they were just going to die. Because then you're just doing it because, well, you just got, especially if you knew better. Because think about rejecting God thousands of times. And then, like, when you know that you have one last chance and you're about to go, and you only do it for that, that's not a good thing. Okay? Because if you were to know that you were to live longer, were you going to actually try to commit and do things for him? Okay? That's between the person and God. Okay? But that's how it has to be. Because we have to be willing to listen whatever he wants and whatever his will is. And Jesus has told us this before in our past Bible studies, that you have to do thy will of thy Father. A lot of people want to just get saved, and then they want to maintain what they're doing, and that's it. That's how you created your life before you had God. As soon as you get God, he might use that. He sees your potential. He wants you helping. The world needs help, big time. There are hungry, there are sick, there are people who need the gospel, the word, people who are unknowledgeable. There are so many out there who need God's will, and God's will is goodness. Okay? So God's good, like the good of God, which is like the opposite of evil. Okay? Just how people corrupt, okay? Make things corrupt, and power hungry. We can relate to that, especially as these days are ahead of us. We can see it. So it's just as important that we spread good. Okay? God doesn't want the devil just to keep working. Because the devil works through people. God works through people. Same way. But we have to be willing to do that. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. So now we're going to get a little bit quicker here. So verse 24, another parable put forth unto... Okay. So I'm going to read it fast here. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed a good seed in his field. When while he slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheats, and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruits, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the household came and said unto him, Sir, did we not sow good seed in the field? From whence they hath it tares? Like, okay, let me simplify this for you guys. Let's call the tares weeds, okay? So a farmer plants a bunch of I don't know. Corn is not a good example because it's so tall, but tomatoes, okay? Plants a lot of tomatoes. Well, if you spread a lot of weed seeds inside of it, then the weeds grow too, right? So now you have a bunch of weeds, you also have a bunch of tomatoes. But you never planted the weeds. So the servants are saying, did we just plant tomatoes? Like, why is there so many weeds? 28, he says, so this is what the farmer says to the servants. He said unto them, an enemy hath done this. The servants said unto him, wilt thou then we go and gather them up? But he said, nay. Okay? He said, no. Lest while ye gather up the tares, we'll root up also the tomatoes. There's so many weeds that they have roots also. If you pull up the weeds, you're going to mess up the tomatoes. Okay? Verse 30. Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them. But gather the wheats into my barn. Okay? The barn is heaven. To burn them is hell. Okay? But first of all, he says, let them grow together. Okay? So it's the same thing. The enemy is Satan. Okay? So Satan is corrupting people's minds. Those would be the weeds. Okay? Especially when people are doing extremely bad things and we notice it and we see it. Even if you're not a believer, you can still see that things are bad when people do it. You can agree that, like, you would, even if you don't believe in the Bible and yet, or like good and evil, and you're not following God, you can at least be like, people will still say that's really evil or that's really bad. If somebody were to, go murder a bunch of people or something. So God is saying that we have to grow together, okay? Because we can't just put everybody who's bad and just get rid of them. That's not God-like. God put us all here on earth to make our own decision, and he gave us our word, but it's our job, right? If more people did more good, God's will, if more people did God's will, more people would see it. And that might have an impact on their life. They might be intrigued on like how somebody could be so generous, because they aren't that generous. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't have done that. For example, like a good deed, a good deed. I mean, some police officers or like firemen do good deeds all the time. They put others before them. That would be considered a good deed, because you're not valuing your life more than another. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that they're 100% rooted and like living for God, but that would be something that God would, that's of good. So, you're helping another. It's a form of love. It's a form of care and true love, because you're not loving yourself more than a different individual. You don't see yourself as more better. Like your life is more important than another, right? Because every life should be just as important as the next. Okay? So when we do good deeds and we spread, the word or do God's will, that's what fights evil. Okay? So you might not see it, because you shouldn't be doing it for results. You shouldn't be doing it right away. Like, for example, no one's typed anything for a while, but there might be one or two people out there actually listening. So I don't need affirmation. Somebody to confirm it. No one. I don't need that confirmation. I think that's the correct word. I don't need confirmation to know what I'm doing is right and it's good. It's God's will. And people have told me all the time, like, they didn't say anything the whole time, and then eventually the next day they told me, hey, like I was there, I didn't say anything, but it was really good. And that was a confirmation. But I didn't need it, but it was a pleasure to hear it. Okay? So when you're doing good deeds and doing God's will, don't be expecting results. There will always be results, but there's a lot that you don't see. For example, if you were to like an elderly person is crossing the road, but they're struggling or something, and then I were to pull over and help them get across the road, well, there would be people technically that are parked or that would see it, and that's going to have some kind of impact on their life, some way, somehow. Their thinking, their, whatever, their heart, that will have, if anything, it will only have a positive impact on their life, some way, somehow. And I don't have to know that or see that, or that's not why I do it. But if we all just were to do God's will, it would be more and more noticed, and more people wouldn't have such a hard heart. And then they have a better chance of eventually trying to get the knowledge of God's word, or turn their head, right? They're like over here in their own life, their own bubble, sinful world, whatever, doing whatever they want. They might actually turn their head for a second and towards God, some way, somehow. And every single time they do that, their roots might get deeper. Their seed might make it to that good ground. Okay? So just because we don't see things, don't think that you're not having an impact on this world. Okay? We're not doing it for ourselves. Okay? So we have to live together, okay, with weeds, okay, until the harvest, which is Judgment Day, whenever that is, when God comes and says enough is enough. And he's done that so many times in the Old Testament. So there's lots of proof. When God gets fed up, he does action, okay? And same thing like Jesus. When he sent Jesus, that was an action. He sent somebody, he did something to make a big impact, okay? So, and many times, God usually intervenes when things get really bad. Not just a little bad, but really bad. So when we're living in this world and things get worse and worse and worse, it's because of evil and sin. You gotta understand that there's a lot of weeds. Gotta remember, God says only a few will make it to heaven. So there's a lot more weeds than there is good seed, or the tomatoes, which is what I was talking about. So sometimes it looks like it's a losing battle. It makes us second guess ourselves. Why would, people want to say, like, why would God allow this or do this? God isn't forcing people to make their decision. Okay? That's the one thing he's trying not to do. Okay? Because he could. But that defeats the whole purpose of why we're here. And like, God would be making us choose him and love him. That's not what he wants to do. He wants us to choose for him and choose him. Then he wants to take us and keep us. Okay? So it's that important that we maintain as things get worse and worse. And it's going to continue to get worse, you guys. It is not going to get better. I promise you. And I'm sorry to tell you this, because I always hope for the best, but plan for the worst. But understanding the word, and I do a lot of research, and I'm very knowledgeable of the things that are happening outside of my home, like in this world and the countries and different scenarios, politics, everything. So I can see the evil just growing and growing and growing, and tensions between evil and all this stuff. So it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And it will continue to get worse. We're not living. It's not one day, all of a sudden, things are going to be the way they used to be. Okay? I promise you. And it's sad to say, but that's how good and evil works, you guys. This is Satan's kingdom, so he corrupts a lot more people, and God already tells us not many people are going to make it to heaven. So think about if like 90% don't make it, 10% make it. And then you got to think there's probably like some who are trying to make it, they just don't. So like say it drops down to like 30%. So there might be like 60% people who just like really don't believe in God, or they dwell in sin so much that that is their lifestyle, and evil has gotten so strong that they do things extreme, like take things to like the max, to the extreme levels. So like we got like we have more weeds, so like 60-70%. You know, some people are struggling but they still don't make it, and only these people over here, the 10% tomatoes, is what is actually, they're doing God's will, they're producing fruit, and God accepts it. Okay, the other ones just, so that's like how it is. That's so, and every day that percentage on the bad side is only growing. Okay, but it's because we allow and let sin become the new normal. So anybody who is young gets taught that it's okay and that it's normal. So sin, since they don't have God and the Holy Spirit, they don't get condemned that it's wrong. So they almost feel like it's right. And just like God said, once you do know, you get offended, they get offended. But it's really that they don't know. That's why it's important to hate the sin, not the sinner. And it's important you got to forgive them, for they do not know. And it's the same thing that God said, or Jesus said when he got crucified. Lord, forgive them, for they do not know. Okay? Which is so powerful, because we want to be so quick to react and to, you know, you did bad to me, I'm gonna like revenge, or, you know, why are they, God, like why, like we are always comparing ourselves to others. So like you'll see somebody, you know, get into a new relationship or a new house or a new job or win the lottery, and you're like, why them? Why are you blessing them? But he's not blessing them. It's, they are of this world, and we are not grasping the concept of God's word. We are still getting deceitfulness of riches that choke the word, which is what God is trying to teach us and show us, which is of good. Okay, so we should not be comparing. And another thing is, they might get lucky in this and that in this world, but in the end, what would you rather have? Like, since you know more about God, like, what would you rather have? $1 billion here on this earth, or would you rather go to heaven? And if you even have a doubt in your mind that you would want the $1 billion, then that's wrong. Remember, a little bit wrong is a lot of wrong. It's the same thing. Wrong is wrong. And don't get offended by what I'm saying, because I'm just teaching the word. You will get offended by the word if you're struggling with it, and that's okay, because I've been there, done that, you guys. So it's okay. It's part of the process, but understand the process. We don't learn this and feel this overnight. This is something super, super powerful. This is something that's very, very in depth, and it's very hard to grasp, because it's not like math. It's not like science. You can't see it. It's harder to explain. It's harder to grasp, especially since we haven't experienced it, you know, especially if you're new, stuff like that. So that's one big reason why Jesus is doing all these parables. All right. So I'm going to hurry up and try to continue. I know the football game's on, and I would even like to catch a little bit of it. Let's see. Verse 31, another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds, but when it grows, it turns out to be the biggest, and it becomes a tree. So I don't know if you guys know a mustard seed. It's very, very tiny, But when it gets planted and it grows and it becomes big, it's a whole tree. Okay. Something so small can become so huge. And that's like the kingdom of heaven. Okay. So the idea to grasp of what the kingdom of heaven is would be like a mustard seed, but it's really like the big tree. Okay. It's so magnificent. It's so big. And don't ever, because I think a lot of people struggle with this, and it's probably because their roots are not so deep and they don't fully grasp God's word of what's good. Not just the Bible, but I mean, it explains it technically. And unless you read it all, then you would understand it. But the word of good, what God stands for, and that is like, we gotta appreciate and strive for that. Just like we're supposed to hate sin, right? We're supposed to hate sin, right? Which is evil. And hate's a strong word, right? We have to love and endure the good word, and good deeds, and like what it stands for. So just like we have an extreme hate for the opposite, we have to have extreme love in the opposite. Okay? So you have to have that kind of passion for it, because that's what God stands for. That's what he wants, because that's what he stands for. Okay? And God even says that, like, he wants us to be like right next to one another, like God, Jesus, and us. He wants us to be that close in spirit, in our hearts, in our feelings, for that. He wants us to stand for what he stands for. Okay? Not kind of, not sort of, but he wants us to be as strong about it as he is. Okay? That's why it's so important, because I feel like some people are just so scared of death and like time, and they want to go to heaven because obviously they're scared of hell, because how hell is going to be. Which you're actually going to hear about it a little bit. So they have fear of hell, so then they strive for heaven. And that is just God's appreciation. But we have to be more for what he stands for. That's what's important. And I feel like so many Christians don't dwell upon that and fully grasp that idea. Because you always hear about when they try to condemn you, or they feel like they're being a little bit aggressive. You can hear it sometimes in their words about heaven and hell. We're only supposed to fear God. Okay? Fear God, because he's the one who's in charge, and and what he stands for, what he does. And then like the consequence is bad and the appreciation is nice, but like he created all this, he allowed all this. You should fear the fact that we read it like in the first stream or second stream early in Matthew, person's in front of God. Oh, I did all these things for you, this and that, but they fell short. And God says, depart from me. I do not know you. Like, I do not know you. Depart from me. That's all he says. That's strong. And that should actually hurt your feelings. That should hurt you. Like, you shouldn't be hurt. You shouldn't be scared because, oh, now I'm not going to heaven. Now I'm going to hell. No. You should be hurt because he says he does not know you. So you think and did so much for him, but you held back and this and that. Remember earlier, we just got done reading. The thorns, the deceitfulness of riches on this earth choke us, so we don't produce fruits. So we're trying to, but we don't, because we're holding on to the riches of this world. So it holds us back, and then Judgment Day comes, and then all of a sudden, the one that we were trying to please, we didn't please him. Like, that should hurt. Not the fact that you wasted your time trying to do it. It's that you didn't do it with your full heart. You put on a fake show and you acted like it. Anybody can do acting. Anybody can say something. That's why I say actions are louder than words. You can tell somebody by their actions. Somebody can say that they want to do something, and oh, I want to do this. Oh, I'll get to it. Oh, eventually I'll do it. But the lack of doing it is the lack of action. The lack of action towards it shows that they are not really that passionate about it or that dedicated about it or like that putting that much effort into it. So you see the lack thereof. Okay? So the lack thereof, like, action speaks louder than words or the lack thereof. So you can really tell somebody if you just pay attention to their actions. And even things that they say, but it's like, more so, like, it's all based on their actions. All right. I'm going to skip down to the parable of the tares explained. Let's see. Then Jesus sent the multitude away and went into the house, and his disciples came unto him, saying, Declare unto the parable of the tares. He answered and said unto them, He that soweth good seed in the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, which is like the tomatoes that I was talking about. The tares are like the children of the wicked one, the weeds of Satan. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. He actually clarified it. The harvest is the end of the world, judgment day, as I said. And the reapers are the angels. Okay? The angels will come in the Revelations. Angels are going to end up coming and in steps, and they do as they say, as God says. Eventually we'll get to that. It's very good. I've already read it once. I'm very intrigued on prophecies and what's to come, so that's why I looked before I really got into, like, committed fully to God. I did a lot of research, so I was able to see, but I already knew better, so I was able to see a lot of evil and God, or evil and Satan working in this world, and it's so mind-blowing on how much there actually is that you could see how much power there was on Satan's side. And then when you go to Revelations, it really proves on how corrupt this world is. And when I say it's getting worse every day, the more you understand that and look into it, which one of these days I might really get into it for you guys, but because it helped me seeing and knowing how evil Satan is and what he's doing, seeing his master plan and the corruption and this and that, and him growing, really made me realize, because I know if there's evil in Satan, then there's definitely a God. You know what I'm saying? If there's bad, there's good. That it's balance. It's the word. It's like how it works. And that's the whole purpose of, God and us, is because he wants all things to be good once and for all. Because he gave the heavenly host, the angels, a choice, but he was absent. When he was absent, one angel was more beautiful than the rest, more powerful, and he convinced them that he was. So, he became their leader when God was creating the heavens and the earth and all that stuff. When he came back, he was hurt. So he said, "Depart from me, I do not know you," basically. And that's why there's demons. That's why there's Satan here on earth. That's why now we're here. So that way we can actually prove that we choose. It's actually quite remarkable. And it's actually, I'm pleased to be a part of it, technically. Because it's the one thing that God can't give himself. So the fact that I know better and he's given me this opportunity to live this long and give me so many chances and protected me through a lot of crazy things in my life, I know, like, I'm pleased to have understood this much. It's actually remarkable. We're living in something, if you ever got into fantasy books, or not that I have, but because we all have that people get really into Harry Potter, for example, or a story or this or that, and they they almost wish that they could live in that moment, that kind of world. And we do live in a crazy, fantastic, fantasy world. Once you actually understand good and evil and what is, this is a fantasy world because it's not so physical and it's not just, it's not what we think it is. It's a lot deeper than that. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully you can kind of relate to understand what I'm saying. Let me see. Okay. Verse 39. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. The harvest is done in the world. Oh, I already read that. Verse 40. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be in the end of this world. This is like the first time he's pretty much mentioning hell and stuff. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend and them which do iniquity. I'm gonna read that one more time. The Son of Man, which is Jesus, shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend and them which do iniquity, and shall cast them into a furnace of fire. Gather out of his kingdom. And there shall be, and shall cast them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. So good. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto treasure hid in a field. Hold on. I don't know if I really want to get into that parable, because they're like really, really short. I mean, I can just read them real fast. Maybe you guys can grasp the idea. I'm not going to explain them though. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto treasure hid in a field, that which when a man hath found, he hideth, and for joy thereof goeth and selleth all that he hath, and buyeth that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a merchant man seeking. Okay, I'll just read it and I'll clarify it just a little bit. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant man seeking goodly pearls, who when he found one pearl of great price, went and sold all he had just to buy the one. So the kingdom of heaven is that magnificent and that great. If you actually knew how amazing it will be, you would give up everything. Okay? Now, like I said, don't do it just for that. But that's how great God is, and that's how like good he is. If we think of like your best day here on earth, whatever that may be. You had, or like maybe your most, like the best week, the best month you've ever had. You might have got your first job, finally started your career, got married, or got proposed maybe to or something. I don't know. But it was like the greatest month ever, right? Okay. Imagine that, but like 100 times better. And honestly, more than 100 times. But imagine that feeling of amazingness every day. Okay, so it would last forever. That enjoyment, like you felt like you're on top of the world, everything was going your way. Now imagine that feeling, but every day, okay? And probably beyond that, because those are just like temporary happiness, and you think they bring you happiness. So it's like you have high hopes and this and that. Fades away fast, don't it? But yeah, this will never fade away. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a net that was cast into the sea and gathered of every kind, which when it was full they drew to the shore. They gathered the good vessels and put the bad away. So shall it be at the end of the world, when the angels come and forth and sever the wicked from among the just. We've heard about heaven and hell a lot, so we can kind of understand it a little bit better than the disciples did at this time. Because you got to think, this is the first time that Jesus has started to mention it. So he's given all these different parables to try to help picture in their head. All right. It's like a picture book. He's giving them a bunch of picture books. so that way they can grasp the idea, especially since they're the disciples, because they're going to have to preach about this and like tell others about it. And shall cast them into the furnace of the fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. He says it again. Jesus said unto them, and then he finally asked, have you finally understood all these things? They said unto him, Yes, Lord. Then said he unto them, Therefore every scribe which is instructed unto the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is a householder, which bringeth forth out of his treasure things new and old. All right. We're almost done here. Jesus rejected at Nazareth is this topic. And it came to pass that when Jesus had finished these parables, he departed, and when he came into his own country, he taught them in the synagogue, in so much that they were astonished, and said, Whence hath this man have this wisdom and these mighty works? Is not he a carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brother and James, Joseph, and Simon, and Judas? So Jesus had 4 brothers. They're saying, okay, and his sisters, so he must have had some sisters. Are they not all with us? Whence then hath this man all these things? And they were offended in him. But Jesus said unto him, A prophet is not without honor, save in his own country, and in his own house. And he did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief. All right, I'm gonna read this little caption of mine that helps with that. It says, no respect at home. Jesus had opened his ministry at home in a synagogue, an occasion marked by a near riot when he returned later. He aroused great curiosity but little belief. The townsfolk couldn't fathom that one who had been raised in the midst of a carpenter, just somebody who works on wood, was now teaching like a rabbi and performing miracles. Jesus declined to display his supernatural power for them and quietly withdrew. All right. So Jesus tried to, he tried to preach of the good word, and that's all it is, you guys. It's just, remember how I said good and evil, and the extreme of like hating it and being strongly for it. It's just when you are strongly for it and you preach about all good and you do all good stuff and you stand for exactly what God stands for, people who are evil, they will not like that. Okay, they'll feel offended by it. They will try to take you down. They are willing to even, in some situations, crucify. So there's many, they attack it, right? They can't stand it. They push it away. They just don't want anything of it, right? It's because that is the evil. That is the evil fighting the good. That's all it is. But it's through people. It's through us. We're just like the messengers in between it. All right. Now there's this couple verses here. This is from my Bible, and it says, what should a leader look like? Not everyone wanted Jesus's kind of kingdom. I'm going to read that a little bit, and it goes along with what we just kind of read there. It says, important leaders, such as presidents and prime ministers, work hard to convey an impression of confidence and power. A leader they assume should look like a leader. And many of them hire an image specialist to learn how, wherefore, or wherever they go. Press agents, bodyguards, loyal assistants, and throngs of eager admirers follow in their wake. Matthew depicts Jesus as a true leader, a king, in fact, but one who broke stereotypes, okay? Because when a lot of people, when they expect a president or a king that they have to look a certain way, they have to act a certain way, they have to, no. That's stereotyping, technically. Jesus had undeniable power. He could quiet an angry storm, which we read about before, and even walk on the surface of a lake. We haven't got there yet. And yet he used the power compassionately for the sake of others. Remember I said when you go to do a good deed, it's not about trying to impress others. Okay? To feed the hungry and heal the sick. He wasn't concerned about a powerful image. and then I put parentheses, ego. Okay, you're not doing it for acceptance of others. You're not doing it to try to make yourself feel better. You're doing it because it's the right way. It's what's right. It's what's good. It's what God stands for. It's what God would want. If God was in your shoes in that moment, that's what he would have done. All right? Or Jesus, since you can relate. Because Jesus is God here on earth in human form. That's all it is. First century Jews who hated the Roman Empire would have rallied eagerly around a militant Jewish king. They rebelled often until a vengeful Roman general flattened Jerusalem in 70 AD. The kingdom of Jesus presented, however, didn't meet their expectations. At the beginning of his ministry, Jesus turned down a tempting offer of glory and territory. We read about that. That's when Satan tempted him about having all the different kingdoms. And he consistently bucked the pressures of the crowd. There's been many times where sometimes Jesus does a miracle and stuff, and they're astonished, and they try to spread the word and whatnot. And then there's other times where they would try to rebuke him or get offended by it, or try to say he's doing trickery, or he must be the devil or something like that. Although he was the most powerful leader ever, he spent his time telling stories, not raising an army. Remember how earlier I said the only way to fight evil is to do good. A lot of people really misunderstand that. So a lot of times when evil is happening, we think that to fight evil is to fight evil. So it's like two wrongs don't make a right, okay? And that would be two evils. So it's so hard to understand, and it's so hard to just accept, because we want to feel protected and we want to feel like it's still right. But if two wrongs do not make a right at all, and I cannot relate that enough, because there are tensions and things that are building up in this world, and when we see it or hear it, we feel like we have to retaliate in the same order of like violence or something. And that is not godly. God will do that, not us. He will only do it if he tells us to. But it most of the time, he lets things get really, really bad, and then he'll interfere when he needs to. There's been many times where this has happened. But it's so important to always just be doing whatever, God's will. Do things that are good. All right. As a true Messiah, he sought not to satisfy people's false image of him, but to please God. Okay? That's what we always need to be striving for, is not what's happening, not how people look at it, not how we think we have looked at it or learned about it, but just to please God. So always be trying to please God. If you have, like I said in the very beginning, if you feel any, if you have any doubt, that's the Holy Spirit telling you you're not at full peace. If you're not at full peace, something's off. Something's wrong. Got to change something, or you got to approach it different, or you got to go a different pathway. Or maybe it's just not the right time. Maybe you're rushing it. Because it's God's timing, not your timing. In chapter 13, Matthew collects several of the stories Jesus told to his disciple, in chapter 13, Matthew collects several of the stories Jesus told to describe his kingdom of heaven, which we just read, a phrase used 32 times in Matthew. Although Jesus never concisely defined the phrase, he gave him clues about the nature of his kingdom. The kingdom is so important. He said that belonging to it is worth selling everything a person owns. Okay, and that was like the thing I didn't really go to talk about much, is the treasure that was found in the field, the merchant man seeking goodly pearls, and when they casted the net and then they got rid of some of the fish. So that is basically what it was talking about. If you actually knew how magnificent that heaven is actually going to be, and I'll tell you guys this too, because I can relate to probably a lot of people out there on this mindset. Because we all love life, right? I mean, to some extent, we're glad to be alive. We've had our good moments, and when things are going good, we just want them. Life is good, right? We don't want it to end. I am pleased to tell you that in the Bible, many times, God or Jesus, definitely God, mentions that he will make a new earth the way he intended to. So don't think that heaven is going to be so different and this earth is going to be gone and there will be nothing enjoyable as something that we enjoy now. I don't know exactly how and what that will consist and mean, but I do know when we are living in this world and good things are happening and good is behind it, not evil, not bad, because you can still have good things in your life and good things happen that God approves of. God would be approving of it even if you're not following them, okay? God approves of families if it's done right, and raising children and certain jobs and this and that, or that kind of concept. But we won't have to slave our bodies. We won't have to slave our time and bodies away to try to make a living, which is what jobs are basically. To have to live, but that is due to technically greed and power, and that is the way the corrupt that are suffering from greed and power have created governments and whatnot, and also like the system of money. So it becomes this thing where now we are technically slaving our time and bodies to survive. It's a different form of slavery. It really is. But it's because of greed and power. Because we can't work together and we can't just all do whatever our part is, whatever our passion is, and work together and distribute it amongst the whole world evenly, where everybody gets their share. Because that's how it should be, but that's not how it is. So, but that's all due to greed and power. So it's the 7 deadly sins, you guys. So people suffer from it, so then they create a system, because not everybody's going to be following God anyways, because there is Satan and stuff. It's just inevitable. It's the way, because Satan has as much power as God here on earth. So it makes sense that he wins a lot, and it makes sense that humans, we are very, very weak. So many of us give into temptations and follow that pathway some way, somehow. Okay. Where was I? Jesus said his kingdom doesn't have geographically, it doesn't have any boundaries, unlike, say, Greece or China or Spain. It can't be charted on a map. Its followers live right among their enemies, not separated from them by a moat or a wall. Yet Jesus predicted that his kingdom would show remarkable growth even in an evil environment bent on its destruction. It's just so important to realize that because a lot of us do want to force godly rules and laws here on earth, and we're very, very opinionated about it, and I get it. It's okay to stand up for it, but with what is in the system that is, it is so corrupt that we are not able to actually make a vote on every little thing. So our voices are not completely heard, and it does suck because our voice is getting technically oppressed. So things are happening in different parts of the world, and we just have to deal with it. Now, that doesn't mean to retaliate with evil, because remember I said you can't fight evil with evil. So it's not like you rebel and do that. You don't go along that pathway. Yeah, it's okay to hate this sin and be upset with it, but this is God. This is Satan's kingdom that we live in, you guys. You got to realize that. And to do something that Satan would be pleased with and something that God would not be pleased with is not okay to try to retaliate because of your anger towards it. That doesn't make any sense. That's not what God would want. All we can do is our best, but doing it God's way, godly. Okay? So you gotta sometimes bite your tongue, and you gotta. Now, that doesn't mean that you dwell in it. That doesn't mean that you have to respect it in a way where you don't dwell on it. You don't turn your eye to it. You don't support it. You don't. I get all that. Okay, I understand, but you don't take it to an extreme level where you're not being godly about it. Okay, and it's so important to be careful because you don't want to. You got to be careful with what you do say because technically you can offend people in a way. And remember, we're supposed to hate the sin, not the person. So depending on how we say things will also depend on how some people take it, or because sometimes people will post things where it is like kind of targeting the person in a way, or that type, and less of the sin. And it should be more of just, you should just be kind of trying to show more knowledge of good and evil rather than trying to be angry and abusive mentally or emotionally or through words towards it. Okay? If that makes sense, because that's wrong too. And I feel like a lot of people don't fully grasp that, so they get, and God says, be slow to talk when you're angry. Be slow to react when angered. And it's emotions. We all get them. So it's very important for us to kind of bite our tongue and calm down before approaching situations. Sometimes it's good just to ignore it and turn and go the opposite way because it's too much energy and effort, and you got to understand the concept of what's happening. Okay? It's revelations. Like, God says it's going to happen. Okay? So no matter how bad you want it to stop or change, I'm sorry to tell you, but it's not going to. Okay? It's just not going to, because it's not supposed to. Like, there's just too much weeds. Okay? There's too much sin. There's too much corrupt. And they're too high in power. And the more you understand it, the more you see it. And that's what is happening more and more every day around this world. And that's why I say, like, when things are going to get worse, that's what I mean by it. It's better just to do God's will and keep doing God's deeds and producing fruit. Okay? It's so important. Not trying to fight the evil and try to stop it, because God already told us it's not going to get stopped. God's the only one who can stop it. But the only way it would be able to get stopped here in the world is if everybody converted over to God. But it's not going to happen because it's a personal choice. But the more you're offending people and this and that, that's not godly. So because you're supposed to love thy enemy, love thy neighbor, and love love your enemy. That's not showing love. So you're showing hatreds a little bit outside of just the sin part, through memes and expressions and wording and stuff like that, or replying to somebody else. So when you do that, you're making the whole situation technically worse. Let me continue. We're almost done. The disciples fail to understand, it says. The kingdom of heaven consists of the rule of God in the world. It's made up of people of all races and from all nations who loyally follow God's will on earth. Jesus stressed that this new kingdom was a major advance in God's plan. Its least member, he said, is even greater than John the Baptist. I talked about that a little bit earlier. That's in chapter 11, verse 11 in Matthew. And also, how I said, like, heaven wasn't mentioned in the Old Testament and whatnot. And that's because it's God's new plan, like it says. And he keeps adapting. You know what I'm saying? Like, God is planning and doing things right now that we have no idea about. Till this day. I doubt he's just sleeping. The kingdom of heaven consists of the rule of God in the world. Oh no, I already read that. The disciples, accustomed to more traditional images of power and leadership, couldn't quite grasp Jesus' concept of the kingdom. They kept asking him to explain his parables, even as they jock-eyed vainly for status. As the days passed, the disciples became convinced that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of the living God. Peter won warm praise for that assertion in chapter 16, verse 17, which we'll get to, probably in 2 streams. But he received Jesus' strongest rebuke in the next scene, when he recoiled from the idea that his leader might soon suffer and die. The paradoxes of Jesus' style of leadership deepened as he neared Jerusalem, the capital city. He allowed one moment of public triumph on the day we call Palm Sunday, yet even then he rode not a chariot or a stallion, but a donkey colt. And a few days later, he let his followers an enduring emblem, not a royal banner or he left his followers an enduring emblem, not a royal banner, not a scepter, but an executioner's cross. It's very strong, you guys, because that was like Jesus's purpose, and that's what the cross is, what a lot of us represent. Like, we stand behind it, that is why. It's because that right there is what Jesus left us. Okay? That's what signifies him. And it's not, he didn't make the cross. Evil and sin made that cross and put him up on it. But he was willing to proceed and commit to doing what he needed to do for us. Okay? He didn't have to get up on that cross if he didn't want to. He could have easily, if he can calm a storm, if he can heal the sick, and if God is that powerful, he could have easily wiped everybody out. All right? He could have snapped his finger and everybody would have been blind. That's how simple. God could have done anything. Jesus could have done anything. But he had to have done this so that way it was easier for us to follow him. And it makes sense because it's already hard. It's already hard, and there's so much temptation. Technically, it's a losing battle for God right now. It always has been, and it always will be. But that's because God gave Satan so much power here. And he gives us all a choice. Okay? He gives us all a choice. And we have to be 100%. Remember, we have to be producing fruit. We just got done reading 3 different ways that our seeds and our roots can make us fail, and only one way that it succeeds. Okay? And with the more evil and corrupt that this world gets, the harder it is. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to silence God and the word and the knowledge of what really is, what is true. And then they only want us to see and hear of this physical world and theories of some of the science and stuff. Don't get me wrong. Some science is good, but some science is bad, or theories, or half-truths and made up blah, 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 blah. So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to silence the true, God's word of what really is and what's really important. And then they're trying to bring in the physical world more, and they're trying to bring in the science and all that stuff more, so that way we believe it more instead of what is really true. And if you don't understand what is really true, then more people are following Satan and falling short. So they're one of those seeds, whether it's in the rocks or the thorns or on the, so more and more people are going to go to hell, but more importantly, they're following Satan. Okay, that's all you got to understand. They are following Satan's way of living instead of God's way of living. So it's always been a losing battle, and it hurts God because he wishes that everybody would obviously see the truth and understand it and commit to it. But so many people either don't know about it, or they run away from it, or they shy away from it, or they just can't give up that one thing that they dwell upon so much. 7 deadly sins. If there's something out there that you can't give up, you're offended by it, so you just can't give it up. You're offended by the word saying that it's wrong, so you give it, like you just keep dwelling upon it, and you can't do both. Can't live for God and do a sin. Okay? The Holy Spirit won't be with you. You won't have faith. And you can't just do it and then go say, God, I'm sorry for doing it. And then 2 days later, do it again. And then do it again. And do it again. Do it again. God's saying, like, because it's not coming from your heart. You're just trying to, remember how I said, like, earlier, when you know your life is at the end, if you know you're not going to survive till tomorrow, everybody's going to be like, I'm sorry, I wish I could have done more. But you're only doing that because you know that you don't have tomorrow. So it's better to do it today. It's better to do it today or soon, because you might not have tomorrow. But more importantly, understanding what God stands for and what he is, wouldn't you want to do more for him today and maybe tomorrow, because you might get that extra day, but like to please him, to finally do what he wanted you to do, because you're full potential. He wants you to do things, but you have to be fully committed. Then he'll let you do then you can produce fruit. You want to produce fruit. And that's why he says some will produce 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. People who fall short and do it late only produce 30. But at least he wants you to produce fruit. He is the harvester. He mentioned it, you know? So you got to produce fruit. That's why it's so important not to wait too long, you guys. Last but not least, I'll leave you with this life question at the end. And then I got to go. It says, could Jesus run for political office in the United States? What kind of leader do people want today? And I thought that was very interesting because one, there's been a few presidents out there who have shown a lot of goodness through their actions, which are basically policies and laws that they pass, what they stand for. Not so much just their words. Everybody can get angry or frustrated and say things that they don't mean. And a lot of times, if we were in their shoes, we would have said the same thing. We don't realize that people's minds and stuff are created through their childhood and their experiences throughout their whole life. So we can't relate because we weren't put in every single one of their situations. Obviously, right is right and wrong is wrong still, but it's through this, not through just your opinion. It's only through this. Okay? It's not your life and your perception of what you've been taught of what right and wrong is, or what society says right and wrong is. The only thing that is right and wrong is in here. Okay? Gotta remember that. So we're so quickly to judge based on all that other stuff that we end up kind of, bringing up just like the bad thing that somebody did a long time ago. Well, I can tell you this right now. People can change. I've experienced it. I'm proof of it. People can change once they commit to God. Once they commit to the true word. Okay? Whatever real good is and what real evil is. Okay? With that being said, that's one reason why I really did like Trump, is because he stood more against the corruption and power hungry people in this world, okay? And he tried to do it the best he could in the short amount of time he had. Now, I'm not saying, because I don't know, only God knows who's an actual full Christian and who's not. I'm not to judge on that at all. I do know based on some of his policies and actions that he did do, that I could see some of the fruit that was leaning towards things that God would be more pleased about and how God would want things. And just like it says, people will be offended when the word contradicts that. So because of the power and hungry and corruption of this world, people have been getting so offended by some of the stuff, and they feel targeted. But in reality, they just are unknowledgeable. So forgive them who do not know. So really, if you're offended or feel attacked, maybe you should at least read this one time and actually sit down where you can focus and understand it, and then make it. And then you'll have a better perspective on it, and then you'll be able to relate and understand it more. Because it's not half of the things on why you're offended or feel attacked. It's just because the way you were raised, childhood, the way your brain got developed a certain way, and you became who you are. And even if it contradicts this a little bit, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You feel bad that I feel bad that like that's how you were raised, or that was how your life has been. Doesn't mean that it can't change. It doesn't mean that you can't be more knowledgeable about it. I was raised different. I was raised upon this at a younger age, where some people are not raised upon it at all, or they hear about it a little bit and then they get a hard heart, and then they, it's not real. I don't believe in it, but you hardly don't even know anything about it. So, and I still don't know much about it, and I've heard hundreds of sermons, I've heard hundreds of lessons, and I know many, many thousands of verses and many different stories, and I'm still learning. So for anybody to tell me that they don't believe in it and this and that, they don't know diddly squat, to be honest. They might, because I feel like I hardly know anything, and they probably know like 5% of what I know. So it's just like, I understand it's hard, I understand it's tough, but to understand how life works and how we are because we get brought up by our parents and whatnot, and things happen along the way in our life where when it contradicts the Bible, it's hard to change what you like and what you dwell upon and what you think is okay and what is not okay, because you got to relearn it. It's like learning, if you were taught your whole life that the world is flat by thousands of people and in your school, and then all of a sudden this is telling you that it's round, you're always going to believe that it's flat. But until you actually understand and learn it, then you would see it from a different perspective. So that's basically the gist of it. That's how we're going to end it. I hope you guys have a good rest of the weekend. It's almost done. Enjoy the Super Bowl. I'm going to go catch the end of it. Take care. Much love. Peace. See you next week.